This is really going to hurt you, darling. I'm sorry, but I've fallen in love with another man, and I'm leaving you to be with him. Oh, damn it. She ruined a perfectly good evening. First warm, clear evening since springtime change. The sky is clear, the beer is cold, and all my errands are done. I was hoping to sit outside and watch the sunset, and then admire the stars while drinking a cool beer and enjoying the love of my life. Then, I hoped to drag her into the house and make love to her for hours and then fall asleep in a sticky, sweaty mess of sheets. I enjoyed the beef and the slight hop after the beer I'd had on this beautiful March evening. You didn't do anything, darling. I just fell in love with a younger man. I guess I'm lucky to have the charm to attract someone with the youthful frenzy and sexual stamina I once enjoyed with you, and I hope supposed to be able to see Mars to the left and slightly down from the sun tonight as it touches the horizon in the west. That would be really cool. After all the years we've spent together, I'm not taking anything from home. I've packed my clothes and personal belongings, of course, and I hope you'll keep my family heirlooms and pass them on to the kids someday. I'm not sure Johnny will have room for these things since his house is so small. Of course, I'm keeping my personal savings and retirement, and since you're keeping the house, I want to take most of the joint savings so Johnny and I can start living together. He hasn't finished college yet, so I'll have to support both of us for a while. That's all I need, and I think it will be a fair settlement for our divorce. Please read these papers all the way through. This is a divorce agreement, and once you sign it, neither of us can back out of it. Artie, our attorney, insisted that this be the case. His cute little assistant is here to notarize our signatures, and then she'll take it to him to make sure it gets registered as quickly as possible. Artie assured me that in just a month or two, the divorce will be final, but we can start living apart as single people right away. So, if it's okay with you, wow. How beautifully the eagles soar through the sky. I know there's a pair of these majestic birds nesting by the river in the valley, and they come here from time to time. Look at them. Eagles choose their mates for life. I wish I could be an eagle and fly around the sun with my true love. All I do is hunt game and circle the earth. Two birds in love with each other. Right here where Artie left the cute little arrow stickers. Oh, but before you sign, he sent you a letter and he wanted you to read it first. Here. Eagle would never give his partner legal documents during the setting sun. I sighed and opened the letter. Dude, I apologize for this person, but you were both my clients and she came to me first. So legally, I had to take her case. Actually, legally, I should have sent her to an independent counsel and refused to represent either of you, but her story was so bizarre and she was so insistent that I be the one to represent you that I agreed. We have remained best friends since kindergarten and know that there is no way I would ever let her or anyone else mistreat you. I'm sure you'll laugh when you read this agreement. It really is in your best interest. Just don't ever let her know that I pushed her into this agreement on purpose. Oh, and I'm sorry I couldn't warn you. She attacked me this morning. Regardless, I promised her I wouldn't warn you in advance so she could avoid an unpleasant scene. But dude, I promise I made it up for you in the right legal terms. Just remember, best interests. Trust me, you don't even have to read this agreement. Just sign it in the places marked cute little pink arrows. Her words, I swear. And then have her send me the paperwork. I've sent Jen, who will attest to your signatures, and the deed will be done. When she leaves, you can read the papers in peace. We'll go over them later. You're gonna laugh your ass off. Believe me, you'll love it. Yours truly, Artie. P.S. Now you owe me a beer. I'll come back for it tomorrow night. P.P.S. Jen's staying to make sure you're okay. She thinks you'll need something special to warm your bed tonight. P.P.S. Burn this letter when you read it. Otherwise, it will get me in trouble for conflict of interest. I signed the agreement. Thank you, darling. I realize this is a complete surprise to you, but I felt our breakup would be the best solution. I know you're going to feel heartbroken about all of this, and I had originally planned to stay with you tonight for one more, final night and say goodbye in a way that would honor all the good times we've shared over the past 20 years. Oh, and Johnny said it would be foolish of me to end our marriage for good and not even kiss you goodbye. I think he's right, but I want to be fair to you. And at least let you be the one to decide how you want to spend our first night unmarried. Jen came on stage and winked at me. God, she was gorgeous. She was Artie's new assistant. Smart, with a keen legal mind, gorgeously tanned. Her silky, smooth legs stretched for miles beneath a tight pencil skirt that defied the business norms governing hem heights. Suddenly, I realized that the girl was actually planning to stay with me. Maybe all those flirtatious moments in Artie's office had influenced her erotic 20-something fantasy world. Look at her leaning over the desk to put her official stamp next to my signature, her breasts hanging lusciously in that silk blouse. Oh, yes, Jen, I'd be very happy to have you warm my bed tonight. I want to thank you for our years together. You've been a wonderful husband and, oh, I just can't resist lace on a piece of skin like that. And for being so accommodating during a difficult time in your life. I'm lost. She looks up and looks at me. Oh, my God. I could have drowned in those deep lakes of brown eyes she calls eyes. And that megawatt smile, it's too much for... My wife keeps pestering me, demanding an answer, and I really can't utter anything. I think he's too upset, Jen suggested, removing her fingers from her mouth. I think you're right in cutting things off and just walking away. He doesn't look too good, so I'm going to stay for a while and make sure he's okay. I'll get the paperwork to Artie tomorrow morning. Mars, there it is, the harbinger of war, north of the setting sun. The stars are beginning to show, and the sun is turning red in its last moments before retiring into the night and leaving the sky to the moon and Mars. My wife turns to leave, but then rushes back to me. To my back, which I turned toward her. Jen stepped between us and stopped her. I have to kiss him goodbye. I should hug him one more time. I didn't turn around. Sky was putting on a show just for me, and it would be rude of me to interrupt him. If he had a choice, he would have told you. Now get a grip and think about him. He obviously doesn't want to make a scene by breaking down in front of you. That's why he turned away. Make it easy for him. Walk away. You have a new life ahead of you, so move on and let him move on too. Go to your man, your true love, your Romeo. Find your new happiness with him. Start your new life with him as a... What's he majoring in college? He's getting a degree in ancient languages. Johnny speaks fluent Greek, Aramaic, and Latin and is learning to read Sanskrit. Oh, that's marvelous. I'm sure this skill set is in great demand for people who need an interpreter in Greece, Palestine, San Diego, and Latvia. Jen had a way of uttering sarcastic taunts without people realizing it. What does your husband do? He's a master architect. He was a wonderful provider and took care of each of our children. My wife was silent. Suddenly there was a contrast between me and her young lover, and not in his favor. I especially liked Jen's remark about San Diego and Latvia. I'm sure there are Latvian teachers who would disagree with the idea of Latin as the language of Latvia and who couldn't give a damn about reading Sanskrit. Except maybe young Sanskrit teenagers looking for Sanskrit issues of Playboy and hot romance novels. Well, that's great, Jen continued, leading my wife toward her exit from my life through the front door. I bet that one successful architect was a wonderful provider, but left you in need of male attention for many nights alone, while he himself was constantly working, away on business trips or meeting with clients. But now that's all behind you. Now you have an exciting young stud who will entertain you with Latin poetry, Sanskrit prose, and biblical parables in the original Greek and Aramaic. You might even be able to travel and visit all those exotic places in the world where Greek is still spoken, like Greece and, well, Greece. Oh, and maybe parts of Macedonia, Cyprus, and lots of Oriental-style eateries and restaurants. Now let's take you to your boy who is waiting so patiently in the car. There was a pause at the door. I heard sobbing and realized it was my ex-wife crying. I thought he was going to fight for me. He didn't say a word. He just looked up at the sky. He didn't even look at me when he signed the papers. He didn't cry. He didn't even blink an eye. It's like he wants me to leave. Yeah, he wants you to leave. He wants you to be happy. That's what you want, and he's giving it to you. Thank God he made it so easy for you. I want to say goodbye. I need to kiss him goodbye. I need to end this marriage. I need to close it. Honey, you closed it. You walked away without financially robbing him. You left his life intact with everything in it. It's such a huge gift, but you're still here. Now end your breakup by walking away quietly. No tears. I heard footsteps on the stairs, and then a car pulling away. The front door lock clicked, and it was quiet. Then I heard Jen's soft footsteps and felt her arms wrap around me, pulling the plaid over both of us. She kissed my neck, and the warmth of her body warmed my back with such force that I realized she was naked. I took the plaid and wrapped it around her while she slowly unbuttoned my shirt and pulled it off my shoulders. The girl's hands slowly slid down my chest, and she took hold of my belt. "You are the luckiest man alive." "You were going to serve her last night, and today she came to Artie's on her own. What happened?" Her hands were on me, working slowly. "If I had served her with the papers last night, I would have given her half of everything and paid her maintenance. I'd spent months gathering evidence, did everything I could to save my marriage, and then treated her very fairly instead of scorching the ground beneath her. But she showed up at your place on her own and asked me to prepare a simple divorce in which she would take nothing but her clothes if I would sign the papers without hassle, and agreed that although the divorce will take months, it becomes final as soon as the agreement is signed. We both immediately recognize each other's independence and sever all marital relations as soon as she leaves our home." I smiled. Her hands skillfully made me feel beautiful. I was relieved when she turned me around and dragged me to the table behind her. "I asked you what happened. You've been flirting with me for months now. Now we're both here, naked in my house, and you want me to talk about the woman who just 5 minutes ago became my ex-wife?" Jen's eyes rolled and she threw her head back impossibly far, exposing the luscious white skin of her throat. "Uh-huh. Good," I whispered in her ear. "She was acting weird last night. She was very nervous." "I know her well. I can read her moods. She had something important to tell me. Very important. She was worried, not knowing where to start." "Not yet, Jen, not yet. I knew she was cheating on me. I knew she had something to say. I had divorce papers drawn up. So I decided to wait and see what happened. I gave her a little more time until this weekend. I just wanted today. I had put up with your innuendos, your shameless flirting, and your little inconspicuous mischief as soon as I looked in your direction. It's time to stop playing games and start dancing." And so we danced. She sang, and when she was tired, I carried her to my bed. We danced some more before sleep swallowed us up. The next morning, I woke up at 10 a.m. and found myself lying in bed alone with a note on my dresser. I took some time to check my wife's belongings and found that all of her clothes and personal items were indeed gone. I made myself an omelet for breakfast and then went out to the backyard and discovered it was a beautiful morning outside. I read Jen's note I found. "Good morning, lover. You were great last night. I left because I'm not comfortable sleeping with someone all night." "Yeah, I know. Girls are supposed to be nice and love men the next morning. Believe me, baby, the temptation was very strong. But I'm not ready to settle down yet. I'm only 28. When I get to that point, hopefully I can find a guy like you to settle down with. Or maybe you'll still be single. In the meantime, don't feel lonely. Call me if you ever want to spend one of your evenings with me again, even if it's just to dance. Jen." If I said I wasn't excited about it, I'd be lying. But I'm a realist. Jen was too young for me. She had her whole life ahead of her. She would want kids, and I was completely done with that chapter in my story. So I turned the page with this little encounter. I would dance again, but probably not with Jen anymore. I finally read the divorce agreement Artie had prepared for my wife and grinned. A lot had been gained during the marriage, and I'd kept it all. The house, cars, furniture, art, bank accounts, investments, my pension, and 100% of my paycheck. No alimony. My ex-wife left her keys and wedding rings on the dresser and completely disappeared from my life. Until 4 p.m. the same day. I got a call from the hospital. My ex was badly beaten by her boyfriend. I gave them our insurance info over the phone and called my kids and ex-relatives to let them know of her misfortune. It was hard to tell them she was in pain. It was even harder to tell them that she had been beaten up by her boyfriend the very night she left me for him. They were all horrified, and oddly enough more because of their mother-daughter's betrayal than her trauma, which they all wrote off to some karmic reaction from the universe. Of course, they immediately took me to task. My kids were in a distant college, and Katie's parents lived in Florida. Neither of them could come here for even a week. The kids begged me not to leave their mom alone in the hospital for too long. Please, Dad, you can't leave her. Her parents have also begged me to take care of her until they get here. We know she doesn't deserve it, but she needs a family and you are all she has. I went to her. I didn't sit with her for long. I made sure I was in the room when her doctor came in. I arranged with a social worker for her to be discharged from the hospital with care until she recovered. I rented a specialized bed and anything else she might need. I helped her with all the daily activities that a person in hospital needs so she didn't have to wait for a nurse. I even went to her new accommodation and packed up her things and took them back to my house. I didn't kiss her once. I didn't fawn over her. I didn't tell her I loved her, and I certainly didn't talk to her about what she had done or what the future held for us. She was in the hospital for 3 weeks. Then she ended up in my house on the first floor in the living room, which I turned into her temporary bedroom until she recovered. All the main bedrooms were upstairs, but Katie couldn't occupy any of them in this condition. The only problem with her arrangement was that there was no full bath on the first floor. So I was forced to see my ex-wife a lot more often than I expected after she put an end to my until then happy life. I did my job well. I took care of her recovery, even her most intimate physical needs. Our children? They came to visit their mother for the weekend and then went back to college. Our son was fortunate enough to find a summer internship opportunity near his college and didn't plan to return home until next Thanksgiving. Our daughter decided to spend the summer and fall semester abroad and work the entire time until she can help. As in, Daddy, please take care of Mom until I can help you. Katie's parents proved to be just as helpful. They never showed up. It's just too hard for us to come north. We just can't take the cold anymore. Still, we appreciate you doing the right thing. So believe me, we're very grateful to you. Torture. Serving her food, sponge bathing her in the bathroom, all the while listening to the endless nonsense that poured from her mouth. Funny how it never occurred to any of the friends she chatted with on the phone to check on the sick one. Nevertheless, I was treated daily to verbatim retellings of their endless, nonsensical conversations. She complained, she whined, she smirked, she never thanked me, and worst of all, she never once apologized for the choice she made, which had put us in this predicament. For the first time, I began to see the image of my wife as a cannonball on a convict's leg. I loved my wife very much until I learned of her infidelity, truly enjoyed every minute we spent together. Even though I was no longer married to her, I still felt attached to her, and it made me angry. I viewed each step in her healing process as a step toward the end of my enslavement. When the cast was removed from her arms, I was able to simply leave her a tray of food, and I no longer needed to feed her myself. Then the cast on her right ankle disappeared, and she was able to transfer to a wheelchair on her own, freeing me from the humiliation of fulfilling her most intimate needs. This event elicited a comment from her that I honestly didn't expect at all. Good. So I can go back to the master bedroom with you soon. I looked up at her smirking face, kneeling at her feet, where I was trimming my toenails, which had grown into disgustingly long claws while locked in their prison in a cast. Oh, darling, while you're at it, could you shave my foot at the same time? It's been in that awful cast for so long it just looks unsightly. I'd like to be attractive everywhere for my return to married life. I finished cutting the burr off the last nail and filed the edge of it before I answered her. No, that's not going to happen. I'd like to vacate the living room, so maybe soon you can move into the guest bedroom and you can return that hospital bed to the rental company. And while your leg does look unsightly, I'm not going to shave it or do anything else for you that isn't absolutely necessary for your recovery. As for your return to family life, I think you'll need to find yourself a new husband first. In case you've forgotten, I remember well that we recently signed papers that you declared irrevocable. If you're thinking about going back to your ex, you're going to have a lot of explaining to do first. You'll have to help him understand past events well enough for him to believe that they can't happen again. Then you'll have to convince him that marriage to you is what a sane man should really be striving for. Frankly, I don't think your chances are good. Oh, don't be ridiculous. Our divorce was never final. Either of us can call it off at any time until then. And you've taken such good care of me that I know you still love me. You've been so attentive and gentle. You even worked from home, and clients would come in with any business that needed you to handle. You did this so I wouldn't have to be alone. I know I was a bitch and whined too much. I appreciate everything you've done, and I'll make it up to you. I called Artie this morning and left a message that I was withdrawing my divorce petition. I had to explain to her the meaning of the divorce petition she handed me at the time, which I immediately signed. In the agreement, she stated that her claim to any community property did not exist, and agreed that, for all intents and purposes, we could act as legally divorced until the divorce was finalized. I explained that if I were to provide her with a residence in a bedroom, especially mine, she could reclaim her rights to reside in my home. But since she was housed exclusively in temporary quarters with rented hospital furniture, I could easily challenge her ability to consider that as her legal residence. If, however, she intends to move into the guest bedroom and stay there for a while, a legally enforceable lease listing her as a tenant awaits her. I then explained to her that her agreement, as she had insisted, was filed immediately and, with the consent of all parties, was considered on an expedited basis. I received the final divorce decree in the mail 2 weeks ago, a week after she was released from the hospital. I actually thought she knew about it, but then I realized her mail must have been transferred to another address since it wasn't delivered here. Her copy of the judgment was probably in a stack of mail at the other address. My ex's head dropped lower and lower. The smirk disappeared from her face. I suspected that during these weeks of recovery, she was experiencing different but joyful emotions. From a sense of realization that she had gotten away with letting dust in her eyes and dodging the divorce, to a sense of relief that she would be able to emerge with minimal loss from the marital Armageddon caused by an immature boy for whom her attractiveness as a partner was limited by sexual experience and the recovery time of an inexperienced lover. And I gently reminded her that there was nothing left of her in this house, and that she herself had given up her family life, her home, and the love of a devoted husband. I had never seen her look so depressed that she couldn't even find the words. But I had the words, and I tried to say them as gently as I could. Katie, I haven't even had time to deal with my own feelings about this. You were attacked the day after you left me. I spent the last month and a half courting a woman who rejected me after a lifetime of loving her. I did it out of respect for our past, and out of respect for the requests of our children and your parents to give you the care they could not give. Now I need you to move out to your own place as soon as you can so I can finally mourn the death of the beautiful life we once shared, and then move on to what the future holds for me. The tears in the corners of my eyes were very real as I turned and walked out of her room. For the next 2 weeks, she tried to talk to me, but I politely declined every such request. Eventually, she had the cast removed from her other leg as well, having suffered the most severe of her orthopedic injuries. Her internal injuries were healed before her forced hospital stay was even over. Now all she had to deal with was a slight limp. She had a couple friends who would come and walk with her. She managed to get into a salon for a haircut and manicure, pedicure, and finally, the night before the day she planned to move out on me came. She came to me and asked me to listen to her once and that she would never bother me again. I conceded to her. She wove a story about her grief. She said it was because she was suffering from aging. She liked the attention from a group of young men she sometimes saw at a cafe frequented by girls from her office. She fell under the spell of one young man who, in addition to his good looks and natural charm, was able to enchant her with his stories about the ancient great thinkers and their great ideas. She liked his musings about what-ifs and fell in love with his impeccable manners. What she didn't understand was his lack of worldly common sense. She was shocked the day after she left me when he became furious that she had come to him practically penniless. When she shared with him that worldly wealth ultimately meant nothing, he physically abused her. His abuse escalated until it became an outright beating. It was then that she became acutely aware that he was only after her for her money. She completely disbelieved what he was spewing about the evils of money and the need to adapt to the rat race. When she woke up in the hospital and saw that her husband had taken over the care of her recovery, she finally realized her mistake. She had discarded the love of a real man for a shadow of a man too superficial to truly love a woman. She had abandoned real life for the sake of finding a Shangri-La that didn't exist. As the days passed, she gradually convinced herself that I had survived her betrayal and cared for her as only a loving husband can. In the 2 weeks since she'd told me she couldn't wait for her return to my bedroom, she'd realized how wrong she'd been at every turn. "I'm sorry. I hope that someday you can forgive me, although I don't think I can forgive myself. I found a small, furnished apartment. I just need to sign the lease and I can move in tomorrow. Or, if you want, I can move into the guest room and sign a lease living here as your tenant. Or, if you want, I could move and live with my mom and dad in Florida. It would be a cheap way for me to start over and you'd never have to see me again. Well, except for our kids' life events. I'll do what you want. I owe you a lot. I'm not a monster." She stayed at my house for another month until she was back on her feet. I went with her when she testified against her lover. He was found guilty of attempted murder and aggravated assault and sent to prison. Well, he'll have plenty of opportunity to learn Sanskrit while the state provides him with a bed, clothes, and 3 crap meals a day. When she was ready to move out, I handed her the keys to a new townhouse apartment just a mile from my house, fully furnished, complete with a stocked pantry and wine rack. The keychain also had the key to her Audi attached to it. I never wanted my wife to get beat up and lose such a big chunk of her life. She was still my children's mom, and I wanted her to be comfortable. The kids were thrilled, although I rebuked them for not helping me with our family crisis. I informed them that each of them would now have to pay their own college living expenses. It was time for them to take responsibility for their own lives, and it was obvious from the sparseness of their response that my children would have a lot to learn. I also informed my children that their tuition would be fully paid for by me, but nothing more. They would have to work to pay their rent and feed themselves, and buy their own car if they were willing. It was a shock, but they reluctantly agreed once they realized there was no other choice. Their mother was broke after the divorce, and she could no longer influence my financial or parenting decisions. This was especially painful for my children, who used their mother to get their way when I refused them. My wife's in-laws were much easier to deal with. They simply stopped being my in-laws. I made it clear to them that while I would always remain friendly, they were no longer family to me. They left me alone with their sick daughter during our crisis, simply because the climate was colder here. The next time they need help or advice from a family member, they can either turn to someone else or wait until I move to a climate as warm as theirs in Miami. Unlikely. I love skiing too much. Artie and I continued to be golf partners, drinking buddies, and companions at soccer and baseball games. I often received invitations to dinner with him and his wife. I never brought Jen to them. You see, even though she was an amazing lover, had a great smile, and a killer body, she had a huge flaw. She was the second woman to dump me within 12 hours. Unheard of. This made her the perfect embodiment of the negative qualities of both my wife and her lover. Superficial, fickle, misleading, using, empty, self-serving, and heartless. She was the personification of everything that was wrong that night my marriage fell apart. I wasn't mean to her. I'm realistic enough to realize that it wasn't her fault. She was guilty only by association. But I'm too proud to ever go back to the woman who rejected my feelings, and that was Jen. So no, Jen, there would be no new dance. I've moved on and there is still no love in my life. I am like a bee, flying from one beautiful flower to another and pollinating many of them. It's hard work, but someone has to do it, and there are many flowers that want... Check that out. They need some pollen in their lives. I can live with that.